The proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. Two people went up to the temple area to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. "O God, I thank you that I am not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I pay tithes on my whole income." But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, the latter went home justified, not the former. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel for this Sunday is taken from the Gospel of St. Luke. We have been reflecting on the proper dispositions for sincere and genuine prayer. In the first reading from Sirach, we were able to identify two such dispositions: lowliness, humility, recognizing that we need God. This disposition is important for our prayer to God to be sincere. And secondly, service of other people. When we serve other people, we become selfless. It's not so much ourselves that we present to God in prayer, but our hearts have been trained to look after the needs of others. And so, people who have truly served other people will pray also, not for the self, but for others. In the second reading from the letter of Paul to Timothy, we get an affirmation of how selfless missionary endeavor has trained the heart of St. Paul to pray with trust in God, surrendering everything to God. And he was not about proving himself before God, lining up his accomplishments as a missionary. Everything was just entrusted to God. And we also learn from St. Paul forgiveness. How a forgiving heart is able to surrender one's hurts, one's wounds, and would even beg God to forgive those who have hurt him. Now that is prayer. Those are the dispositions we need for genuine prayer. In the gospel, all of these are brought together. Jesus wants to teach us through the gospel passage and through this parable how self-righteousness and how looking at other people in a demeaning way are not to be tolerated in prayer. They should disappear if we want our hearts to be prayerful hearts. Let us focus on the two figures in the parable. One is the Pharisee who goes to the temple. And the description of the Pharisee here is his head was unbowed. So, you have here a posture that speaks of self-possession, confidence. He can look at God in the eye. Someone who can face God and say, "I have nothing to hide. I am proud of my accomplishments." And in the prayer of this Pharisee, we find a list of his good acts. He is quite proud of these acts performed for God and to impress God. He fasts, according to him, twice a week. and he pays tithes on all that he possesses. So, this man is good, really good. He is able to observe some of the dictates of the law. So this man is positively, to be accepted, not only by God, but by all of us. But how come his prayer did not become acceptable to God? Well, first of all, because it was a prayer where he does not need God anymore. It seems that God needs him more than he needs God. His prayer was one of proving to God how good he was. His prayer was not selfless. His prayer was not humble. His prayer was, in fact, a rehearsing of his accomplishments before God. And this type of prayer does not reach God, does not pierce the heavens. But another element of the prayer of the Pharisee that God did not like was this. He looks at the tax collector who was with him in the temple. And what did he say? I thank you, God, that I am not like this sinner. So he distances himself from this sinner. I am not like him. By distancing himself from the sinner, he is trying to convince God, I am pure, I am clean, unlike this unclean person. So, what adds to his pride before God is his demeaning stance towards the neighbor. Pride and despising your neighbor who is lowly, who is a sinner. These two dispositions made the prayer of the Pharisee unacceptable to God. We hear echoes here of the first reading and of the second reading. Lowliness and service of others, forgiving others rather than despising others. These are needed for our prayer to be genuine. Now we turn to the tax collector. Unlike the Pharisee, the tax collector distanced himself from God. Why? He realizes how sinful he is. He realizes how his sinfulness has brought him away from God, and he admits that. And he could not even raise his head to look up to the heavens. His eyes were down as a sign of his unworthiness. He admits that he is not worthy of God. He admits that he needs God. And so his prayer is, be merciful to me. And that is accompanied by a physical demeanor with the head bowed and with his hand clutching, striking his breast. All a sign of humility, all a sign of a helpless person who cannot save himself and so who needs God. He has nothing to prove to God except his need for God. And this man who entered the temple, negatively, according to the dictates or the norms of the world, at the end of the parable, Jesus says, this person leaves the temple justified before God. Whereas the Pharisee entered the temple on a positive note. He has a lot of achievements, but he left the temple without any positive mark coming from God. So again, humility, a genuine self-understanding where I know I need God. I have nothing to prove before God. And caring for other people, serving other people, forgiving other people, rather than demeaning them. These are the dispositions that make our prayer really genuine. So our best preparation for prayer is not only a few minutes before our prayer time, what we do in daily life, how we conduct ourselves in humility, in forgiveness of others, in our solidarity with sinners, our understanding of the plight of those who are sinful, because we are also tempted and are sinners ourselves. These are the proper attitudes that make our prayer genuine. So, let life and prayer meet in the proper dispositions. Tomorrow we celebrate the feast of the Apostle Saint Jude Thaddeus, popularly known as the patron saint of those facing hopeless cases. And I can attest to this. Wherever you find a church dedicated to Saint Jude, you have people going there, early morning, up to the wee hours of the night, praying. I happened to see a devotee of St. Jude, and I know how far his residence is from the church that he frequents. So once on the feast, and I was able to celebrate the Mass, I asked him, you must start very early in the morning, to come here to this church, and I see you regularly. And he said, listen, first of all, I realized that in spite of all my achievements in life, I am now retired and my children are all secure. I realize more and more that the meaning of my life is not my achievements. I need to continue relying on God. And at this stage of my life, I don't pray anymore for my needs. I pray for people who are more needy than I am. At this stage of my life, I know I have nothing to boast of. I am just a voice for people who need God more. Isn't that what we have been talking about? And he turns to God through the help of St. Jude. To all the devotees of St. Jude, may our visit to his shrine, to the churches dedicated to his memory, instill in us the spirit of true prayer. We need to be humble. We are not God. We can boast only of our weaknesses and our need for God. And let us not distance ourselves from others. We are as sinful and as needy as others. So a compassionate, understanding heart will make our prayer sincere. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it. My brothers and sisters, for almost 5 years now, you have accompanied our show with admirable generosity. Certainly, we would not have met the demands of this mission for that long a time without your support. But we may not be able to continue producing the show if the funds get depleted. It is for this reason that we knock again on your hearts. Be our fellow missioners. Let us work together that we may bring the good news to every Filipino home here and in other parts of the world. Whatever you may offer, no matter how big or small, will definitely keep our mission alive.